Hi, and welcome to the New Statesman podcast. Rachel, how's Labour responded to the budget?
I think they're making kind of similar points that they've been making for a while, is that, growth is very, very weak. There's nothing in there for public sector pay. The strikes are still ongoing and the overall economy is in a pretty difficult position. One of the main points that they're actually going to sort of mount a parliamentary challenge to is the changes to the pensions, which kind of basically just benefit 1% of the population, some of the higher earners. And when you actually boil them down, kind of amount to something similar to an inheritance tax cut, basically. And I think they're kind of going to try and get that stopped in Parliament or bring some kind of amendment, I think, in the days ahead. So,
okay, and that's the big policy that they're saying they would reverse.
Yeah. That's the one thing that they say that they do very, very differently. In terms of some of the other policy areas, I think. There's been a lot of talk over the last few days how this was basically the Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson's childcare plan, and that they've kind of shot their fox here at the last minute. I mean, I think that's to some extent true, but not entirely true. I think Bridget Phillipson gave a speech last week that said, her plan is about broader reforms. It's about improving the quality of childcare and improving the sector for the workforce as well. But I think it's also kind of fair to say that they're a bit surprised that the Chancellor's spending some £4 billion, albeit after the next election, but yes. £4 billion on childcare reforms that they would otherwise have liked to have made a very central plank of their general election campaign.
Well, this is the thing. They've sort of been teasing us for a long time that they've got this kind of flagship childcare policy in the style of Anthony Albanese in Australia, but they've never actually said quite what it is or how they'd fund it. And now this big plan has come out from government. I first thought this is going to be a pain for Labour, but actually it frees up money for them, doesn't it? If the Chancellor's chosen to spend this many billions of pounds on childcare, then it means that they've got that to play with to put their own policy together.
I think that's right. And I think, when you look at the broader picture, there's an awful lot of call for more state spending on all kinds of things. And this kind of brings the current government into the Labour Party's space, really. Yeah. Yes, it gives Labour a chance to outflank the government at some point before the next election. It allows the opposition to talk about the quality of provision as it is and how it's got into that state. For example, really good policy from Jeremy Hunt is kind of giving these incentive payments to childminders, very different from childcare provision in a nursery. But they had before 2018 twice as many leaving the profession as joining it because of for some reasons because of the model of childcare that the government was bringing in with the subsidies, but also just because that job was just too expensive for them to do, and they could get better employment doing something else. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of just solving a problem that was created since 2010, since the Conservatives came to power. So it gives the Labour Party a chance to make that argument as well, I guess.
Right, OK. And Labour obviously have been trying to woo business to, a successful extent in recent months. How have businesses responded to the budget? And do you think, they could still be tempted by a Labour alternative?
Obviously, there's this big headline of a £9 billion business tax break from the budget. In terms of things like corporation tax, I think businesses won't necessarily be that put off by a rise to 25% because that's the headline rate, and the headline rate can often be quite misleading. The headline rate of tax, corporation tax in the UK, seems to have dropped by a lot since the 1970s, but actually the amount of tax that businesses pay relative to their earnings has remained about the same because the tax base has got bigger, so the amount of stuff that is taxed has got bigger, and that has kind of shaped our economy, helped to make us more of a services economy because a company that say builds a new factory makes more use of reliefs. Mm-hmm. So having a higher headline rate and bringing in reliefs is generally a positive for business investment, which is sorely needed. So that could be quite a good thing. But that's, some of the other measures that I haven't talked about, these business investment zones for 80 million quid each, might be quite a bit to you or I, but to a whole sort of business, district, that is peanuts, frankly. There are lots of other things that affect whether or not businesses invest in the UK, infrastructure, political stability, things like that. So in a way, one of the more positive things about the budget, just being boring, being stable is quite good for businesses. All the businesses I've spoken to over the last few years have sort of said one of the things that holds back investment is, not knowing if the Minister or Secretary of State that you might be speaking to about regulation or the possibility of investment will still be in their job in 3 months' time. So just kind of wait and see. Yeah, so there are measures that businesses will definitely welcome. There are other things that are not addressed. Business rates is probably the biggest one, and VAT, which is particularly relevant for small businesses. So if you're a small business and your turnover is £84,000 a year, you don't have to register for that. If you're over 85 grand, you do. So there are a lot of businesses that kind of grow to a certain point and then don't grow further, which is keeps things, which is not great for the economy.
Well, yeah, let's talk a bit about what was missing from the budget. The day before the budget, I was in Parliament with some Tory and Labour politicians who were saying that, now is the chance to bring capital gains tax in line with income tax, which is sort of seen as quite a common sense policy, but hasn't yet been sort of taken on by either the Labour Party as one of their policy proposals if they make it into government, or by this government. There's been some disappointment that they didn't take that opportunity to raise revenue that way. Rachel, was there anything you noticed that was glaringly missing?
Well, one thing that certainly matters to businesses, and apologies if you've discussed it already, is their energy bills are about to go up massively because they're about to experience a cut in support of about 85% at the end of this month, and I think there's obviously going to be a knock-on impact in prices. If you're, for example, if you've got a hairdresser, for example, and you've been struggling for the last couple of years, and now all of a sudden your energy bills are about to go up, and the dam breaks, that has a knock-on effect for customers. I think other things that are missing, just nothing on housing that I can recall. Public sector pay is the one that stands out for most people, and obviously social care.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be a get back to work budget. Or back to work budget. That sounds a bit like Jeremy Hunt's bossing the workforce around. Back to work budget. But I mean, if you're, for example, a woman over 50, there's a very good chance that you're looking after, you're an elderly relative. Mm-hmm. So I just wonder how much mileage long term there is in, encouraging women to get involved in the workforce. If we talk continually about closing the gender pay gap, only for them to get to the end of their career and for those things to be kind of blown apart because of our social care system not working properly.
And of course, the fact that our social care system is so stretched means that it affects the NHS in ways that is also keeping people out of work because they're waiting so long for treatment. Yeah,
I mean, there was no investment in public services overall, and you have to wonder if Jeremy Hunt is getting a little bit better at bomb disposal, because I think if you're looking ahead to sort of a spring general election next year, why would he give out all the sweets now? Why wouldn't he kind of try to space it out, try to make sure that he gets a maximum credit for everything that is kind of in the economy that he's able to do between now and the next election.
And in the meantime, we'll just suffer terrible public services.
Well, quite, yeah. And the other thing that occurred to me was that I don't know whether you've spoken about or not is the immigration numbers.
No, we haven't actually, and that was the last point that I wanted to bring in. So I'm glad that you mentioned it there. Yeah, great minds.
So the OBR predicts 245,000 net migration a year. I don't think Suella Braverman's going to put that on a bill anytime soon. And obviously there's a big difference between, when we talk about illegal immigration and stopping the boats, the other kinds of migration that are coming to the country of people that are coming to the country to work. But the economy relies on immigration, and that's kind of a fact that is being underlined quite boldly by the OBR here. And it's kind of when both parties get towards the next election and they're talking about our relationship with Europe and what kind of migration that we want, that kind of just feels like it's becoming ever closer as something that they can't avoid talking about.
Yeah, and it has been quietly slipped in. It wasn't part of Jeremy Hunt's speech in the Commons, but what they have done is added construction workers to the shortage occupation list, which means that the visa rules are much looser, and so you can bring in more workers from abroad to come and do those kind of jobs. Not something clearly that he wanted to announce in front of his party, but this has been going on basically ever since the EU referendum. We actually have higher net migration now than we did before the vote, which isn't something that they were suggesting when they were running the Leave campaign and making promises about controlling the borders and things. And of course, there is a distinction between what's going on with asylum seekers coming across the Channel, but it kind of feels like the sort of legal migration side is being much more liberal and loosened up, while they're trying to, use the tough rhetoric on other kind of incomers, to try and sort of make themselves still sound tough.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I mean by bomb disposals. Suella Braverman comes outlines how, talks about terrible language about an invasion of our southern coast, but then on the other hand, the actual actions of the government is kind of liberalising immigration for construction workers because it's required, and that's entirely popular with some voters and required for the economy. But
and businesses probably want more immigrants.
I mean, I guess to the extent that there was housing policy, that is it, is bringing in cheaper workers for the house building industry.
Not something that he is proud to announce. Okay, well, thank you so much, both of you. I think we got through a lot there, and we will be obviously unpicking the implications of this budget as it plays out. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Anoosh.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of the New Statesman podcast. And if you want to watch more of our videos, you can find them on our YouTube channel.